My name's Jake Morrison, 34 years old, Army Corps of Engineers, and third-generation owner of 47 acres just outside Austin, Texas. Folks picture Texas as dry, dusty, maybe tumbleweeds blowing across flat prairie. But my land? It was paradise. Oak trees older than the town itself, pasture that rolled green in spring, and most importantly, a creek that split the property right down the middle. That creek was our anchor. Back in 1978, my grandfather and a crew of his Army buddies built a small earth dam across it. Nothing colossal, just a sturdy mound of clay and stone with a steel gate spillway. It gave us irrigation, a steady reservoir, and most importantly, legal water rights dating back to 1923. Those rights weren't just words on paper. They meant that every drop flowing downstream existed at our family's discretion. I grew up on that dam. My dad and I would fish from the spillway, and he'd always say the same thing. Jake, never sell this land. People will come with contracts and promises. Don't let them. This dirt is Morrison dirt. So I didn't. Not when developers came offering checks with too many zeros. Not when smooth-talking lawyers wanted a corner parcel for subdivision access. And definitely not when the Willowbrook Estates HOA started sniffing around. They were relentless. McMansions sprouted up one by one on the other side of my fence line, complete with tennis courts, manicured lawns, and SUVs polished like show cars. I thought it was funny, watching people pay $500,000 to live packed like sardines while I had 47 acres of breathing room. But Willowbrook Estates wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a machine, an HOA with teeth. And when they thought I was gone for good, they moved in. In 2019, I was deployed to Afghanistan. 12 months in a sandbox, eating MREs, clearing culverts, and helping rebuild infrastructure after bombings. While I was overseas, Willowbrook saw their chance. They filed fraudulent paperwork claiming my land was abandoned due to military deployment. They greased palms at the county zoning office. They rezoned the property for residential development, and without my consent, construction crews rolled in. When my boots finally hit Texas soil again, 35 brand-new McMansions stood where my hayfield used to be. Paved roads, sidewalks, and a gaudy stone sign that read, "Welcome to Willowbrook Estates Phase 2. I thought I'd stumbled into a nightmare. My grandfather's pasture was gone, covered in vinyl siding and white picket fences. Children played basketball in driveways poured over soil my dad once plowed. I stormed into the HOA's community center. Inside, a group of overdressed board members sat smug behind folding tables, clipboards in hand. Mr. Morrison, the president, Karen Thompson, in full tennis skirt and visor, said sweetly, "I'm afraid you no longer own this land. The Willowbrook Estates HOA has assumed stewardship. If you'd like to live here, you'll need to purchase a home like everyone else." The room laughed. That's when they slid an eviction notice across the table. I didn't say a word. I just reached into my folder, pulled out the 1923 water rights deed, and slid it right back at them. They barely glanced at it before smirking. They had no idea they were sitting on dynamite. See, water rights aren't like property lines. They're older, stronger, and when it comes to federal law, they override just about everything. As an Army Corps engineer, I'd spent years designing levees, dams, and irrigation systems. I knew every inch of that little earth dam on my property, and I knew exactly what would happen if someone was dumb enough to build downstream without consulting flood maps. Spoiler, Willowbrook Estates was built smack in the middle of a 100-year floodplain. For months, I played it cool. I fixed fences, mowed grass, and waved politely as HOA Karens cruised past in their golf carts, gossiping about mailbox paint colors. But every evening, I walked up to the dam and studied the spillway. Rusty, but solid. Strong enough to hold. Until I wanted it open. The HOA thought they'd won. They planted flower beds. They held community barbecues. They even fined me, the actual landowner, for keeping livestock, my father's 3 aging cattle, too close to their property line. I smiled and paid the fines, because I knew something they didn't. You can argue with lawyers. You can fight in court for years, but you can't argue with gravity and water. The night came in April, after a week of heavy Texas rain. The reservoir behind my dam swelled higher than I'd seen in a decade. Nature had primed the stage. At dawn, I walked up the dam with a crowbar slung over my shoulder. Mist rose off the reservoir. My boots squelched in the mud as I reached the steel crank wheel. It took some muscle. The gears groaned after years of disuse, but slowly, the spillway began to creak open. First a trickle, then a gush, then a roaring sheet of water. Downstream, the manicured lawns of Willowbrook Estates transformed into rivers. Driveways turned into creeks. By noon, SUVs floated like bath toys. Backyard swing sets washed into culverts. The HOA president, Karen, screamed from her golf cart as water surged around the wheels. "Call 911! Call FEMA!" she shrieked. I just leaned on the railing of the dam, arms folded. For the first time in history, Willowbrook Estates finally had lakefront property. Panic spread fast. Homeowners scrambled, dragging soggy furniture onto porches. Sprinkler systems shorted out. Electrical boxes fizzed and sparked. One man in cargo shorts yelled at me across the flood, "You can't do this! You'll pay for this!" I held up the deed like a preacher with a Bible. 1923 water rights, I called back. Federal law, boys. The creek flows where I tell it. By sunset, Willowbrook looked like Venice. Except instead of gondolas, there were minivans, half submerged in muddy water, and the best part, I hadn't broken a single law. The dam was inspected. The water rights were valid. The spillway operated exactly as designed. The HOA had built their empire on stolen land, in a floodplain. Gravity and paperwork had just evened the score. The next week was beautiful chaos. Insurance adjusters refused to cover the damages. Act of God, they said, though I'd call it an act of Morrison. FEMA inspected and declared the development unsafe. County inspectors pointed to floodplain. Maps the HOA had ignored. And me? I sat in county court with my deed in hand. The judge barely needed 10 minutes. "Mr. Morrison," he said, "your family's water rights are valid. This development never should have been approved." The HOA's lawyers sputtered, but it was useless. The entire Phase 2 of Willowbrook Estates was condemned. Homeowners were furious, not at the corrupt board who built illegally, but at the HOA leadership who had gambled with their futures. Karen resigned in disgrace. The HOA crumbled under lawsuits. One by one, families abandoned their soggy McMansions. Grass grew over sidewalks. Tennis courts cracked and filled with weeds. The subdivision became a ghost town. Today, my 47 acres look a lot more like they used to. The McMansions stand empty, windows dark, slowly sinking back into the earth. The creek flows steady, the dam holds strong, and the reservoir glitters like it did when I was a kid. Sometimes, I walk the fence line at sunset and chuckle at the faded Willowbrook Estates sign, half submerged in mud. My grandfather's words echo in my head. Never sell this land. I didn't. And when they tried to take it, I didn't fight with fists or lawyers. I let the land fight for itself, with a little help from gravity. So if you ever find yourself across from a smug HOA board, remember this. They can fine you. They can harass you. They can pretend they own what's yours, but they can't stop the water when it comes. And for Willowbrook Estates, well, I just gave them exactly what they wanted, lakefront property.